At what point should a contractor who's currently operating as a sole prop convert to LLC? The answer is yesterday. You should never have operated as a sole proprietor in the first place, especially if you're a contractor. There are so many risks with what you're doing.
All right, so let's just go to the very beginning of a business's life cycle. If somebody just starts doing business today, doesn't do any kind of company structure, they're automatically considered a sole proprietor, correct?
Correct, yeah. I mean, that's just literally, if you're a contractor and a handyman, for example, and you post an ad on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever the different platforms are, and you just post an ad and people say, hey, come and fix my stuff, then you're just showing up and they're writing you a check or handing you cash. They're paying you. So if they're paying Chuck, they write a check to Chuck, and that's it. That's what's considered sole proprietorship. You're not operating through a business structure. You don't have any legal protections. You don't have a separate legal identity. People pay directly to your personal bank account. Everything goes through your personal social security number for tax reporting and everything. You don't have a separate legal identity. And that would be the way you would start if that's what you were doing. That would be very, very, very basic, low level. In my opinion, the only reason you would ever operate really as a sole proprietor, and I mean ever, I'm talking from day one, the only reason you would ever do that is if this was really a low risk, very small scale side hustle. When I was living predominantly in North Carolina, I would buy and sell things online sometimes. Like I would buy a motorcycle and resell it, or buy a car and resell it. In that case, yeah, I'm not registering a company for that because it's a really small, low-level side hustle. Mostly I'm getting paid in cash, that sort of thing. But if you're going to make a real business out of it, sole proprietorship's never really a great option.
And so what most construction companies will do is form an LLC. So Can you talk about what that means? What's the difference between the sole proprietorship and the LLC? At what point should a contractor who's currently a sole proprietor consider forming an LLC?
I'll answer that in reverse. At what point should a contractor who's currently operating as a sole prop convert to LLC? The answer is yesterday. You should never have operated as a sole proprietor in the first place, especially if you're a contractor. There are so many risks with what you're doing. You could end up damaging somebody's house tremendously. You could get hurt. You could hurt somebody. You could have your helper get hurt. If you're operating as a sole proprietor, you are personally taking on all of that liability. I mean, let's say you're a plumbing, and even better one really is a roofing contractor. Let's say you're a roofing contractor and you're putting a new roof on somebody's house, and you're kind of mid-process and you haven't laid the rest of the shingles or tiles or whatever you're doing, and somebody falls or the roof collapses. Maybe the homeowner got up on the ladder and said, hey, I'm going to go check it out and see what's going on. Or maybe you've got an employee that falls off the roof and gets killed. If you're operating as a sole proprietorship, crazy. You're taking on personal liability for what can be a huge, huge risk there. So the answer to the question, when should you do it? The answer is you should never have done it in the first place. So you should automatically have an LLC. And if you haven't done yet, you should do it yesterday. And so the differences between a sole proprietor and LLC I alluded to is basically, as a sole proprietor, you have 100% of the responsibility of any action of your business. So if that person falls off the roof and gets killed, you are personally liable for that death, which means that person that died, their family is going to sue you for an enormous sum of money. I use this as an example because I actually grew up in a construction family, and this was a real situation in my dad's company when I was pretty young. I was like small, single-digit age kid. But I remember the story later when I was a teenager, Dad explaining it to me. And basically, they had a subcontractor who was the roofing subcontractor. And what had happened is that subcontractor, they were operating as a sole proprietor, and they did not have workers' comp. And so in the state of North Carolina, I think that was Virginia, actually. In the state of Virginia, you were not required to have workers' comp unless you had two or more than two employees in addition to yourself as the owner. And so this roofing contractor chose to forego the expense of workers' comp, didn't have the insurance, guy fell off the roof, gets killed. The problem was the guy had a newborn baby, and the wife was a stay-at-home mom, And basically, the subcontractor vanished when they got sued. So they sued my dad's company, which was the GC. And that was it. They ended up getting sued for millions. And they ended up actually having to pay a salary with cost of living increases for 18 years until that kid turned 18 years old. And they had to fund a college fund for that kid. I mean,
Wow.
It was a ton of money. Now, insurance for my dad's company, the GC covered part of it, but not all of it. They didn't have the amount of coverage to cover all of that. And if you're a contractor, that is a very real risk. Like, it's not even anecdotal. Like, my dad literally lived through it. I didn't exactly live through it. I was a kid, but my dad lived through it, and it was a very real situation. And so, I mean, it's a very real risk. If you have a major issue and you're operating as a sole prop, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to lose everything because they're going to sue you and they're going to win and they're going to take it. They're going to take your house, your cars, your bank accounts, literally everything. So you never want to operate as a sole prop because comparatively, if that was in an LLC, they can't come after you personally. They can only sue the business. Now, you may lose the business, you may lose the assets of the business, but your personal assets are not at risk at that point. Like, nobody can come after your house, your cars. Maybe you have some other investments outside of your business. Maybe they're structured in a different way, but they can't come after anything personal if the activity happened from the business. That's what we call an inside creditor liability. So it's a liability that arises from the activity of the business itself. And with a sole prop, you're fully exposed to everything. With a LLC, you're limited. I mean, that's what it means, limited liability. You're limited to the activity that happened within the operation of that business itself. If you are operating as a sole prop and you have any reasonable amount of business, I mean, you could just be a one-man shop, or maybe you got a helper and you do HVAC work or something. You're probably still bringing in a reasonable income. I mean, you're talking a few $100 a year to maintain an LLC. This is the cheapest insurance you could possibly have. It is way cheaper than having high coverages on liability to cover everything. Don't get me wrong. You want the liability coverage also, but instead of paying for liability coverage for up to 10 million, for example, maybe you only have like a umbrella policy that covers $1 million, and then you're running your business through an LLC to protect your personal assets.
So a sole proprietor is just fully responsible for everything, no matter what. The limited liability company limits your liability in case something goes wrong.
By the way, like, just think about it. You could have one employee driving your company truck. Maybe he's not even working, but he's driving your company truck and gets in a car crash. They're going to sue your company. But if you're a sole prop, that company is you. You're going to be fully exposed there, even if he just like has a car accident driving around in his off hours because he happens to have the keys to your company truck.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's crazy to operate as a sole prop. There is no good reason to do that.
So there is limitations to that, right? Because I used to think that an LLC basically made you not liable for anything. But somewhere along the lines I heard or read that you're covered if someone, like one of your employees makes a mistake or the homeowner gets hurt. But if you personally make a mistake, they can still sue you personally, correct?
If they find you negligent, like you personally, they find you personally negligent. For example, let's say you come to work drunk. That's a great example of negligence. And let's say you're a contractor who does tree work. You're an arborist and you do tree work, and you come to work drunk one day, cut a tree down and drop the tree on somebody's house. You're going to have personal liability there because of negligence. Absolutely, they're going to sue the business, and they're going to name you also in that lawsuit because of that negligence. Now, if you weren't drunk and there wasn't negligence and like, who knows, you're cutting the tree down, you accidentally drop it. I mean, you weren't negligent. It was just a mistake, or the rope broke or something like that. You're trying to catch the rope or catch the chunk of the tree before it swung down. The rope breaks, or the wind, it's gusty wind. The wind blows the tree the wrong way or something. They might try to sue you personally, but unless they can prove negligence, that you actually did something wrong, then you wouldn't have any liability. They're just going to go out to the business. It doesn't stop them from suing you personally, but without proof of negligence, they're not going to get anywhere there.
Okay. So as long as an owner of an LLC is operating in good faith, not coming to work drunk, not negligent, then the company structure will protect their personal assets from
absolutely
accidents. Okay, very cool.